Hi there. Welcome to Application Monitoring and Tracing in Kubernetes, how to avoid microservice hell. So I'm going to give you a demo of a microservice application and how we can monitor using Prometheus and Jaeger. And I'm going to deploy this in a Kubernetes cluster that I have on GCE. And so let's just jump right into it. So the first thing we're going to do is going to go ahead and deploy Prometheus. And we're going to do this by using Helm. So we're just going to got a Helm command right here. Just a normal Helm install Prometheus. Kick that off really quickly. Make sure that everything's fine. And that's up and running. It's going. And then next thing we're going to do is we're going to deploy Jaeger. And we're going to do that via Helm. So there we go. Using Helm install Jaeger. And then we're going to make sure that got kicked off correctly. And there we go. So Prometheus being installed, and we got Jaeger being installed. I didn't deploy all the components for Prometheus, just the Prometheus server. As you can see for Jaeger, Jaeger has either supports a Cassandra or Elasticsearch backing store. It's deploying a production Cassandra cluster, so 3 nodes. So this is the first node that's being propped up, and we'll just wait for that to finish. So it looks like we already have Prometheus up and running. We got a 2-node Prometheus server, so a highly available server. And looks like the first node for Cassandra is up and running, and the second one is being deployed right now. And there we go. So the third node of Cassandra is up and running, and everything's running fine. So next thing we want to do is we want to deploy this microservice-based architected application, and it's pretty simple. It's just consists of 2 different microservices. The first one is called front end, and what it does is it just offers up a simple HTTP server. And front end, what it does is call into another microservice called backend. What backend does is it does a simple curl on the Google homepage, so google.com. It takes the HTML from there and returns that up to front end, and then front end takes that and returns that up to the user. So next what we're going to do is we're going to deploy the networking services, so the Kubernetes service for front end and back end. And then next what we're going to do is we're going to get all the services that are currently installed in our Kubernetes cluster, take the node ports that are listed here for the Jaeger query and the Prometheus server and front end, and we're going to take those ports. They're exposed currently as node ports, so we're going to take those ports and put them into the GCE firewall so we can expose them out to the internet so we can actually go ahead and access them. Let's go ahead and do that now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring up the Prometheus and Jaeger UIs. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to deploy our the pods for that consist of our 2 microservices for our given application. I'm going to go ahead and deploy that right now. And go ahead and check to make sure that they deployed correctly. Looks like they have. We have front end and back end there. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to run a curl against front end, right? Which in turn will call back end to curl the Google homepage and return that HTML all the way up to the top. And so we should see on our screen here a dump of HTML for google.com. And there's the HTML there. Now, if we go into Prometheus, what we can do is go ahead and take a look at all the different properties that are being monitored throughout the system. So we just did a curl, and we have, let's see if we can find it. There it is. So we had two metrics that are being exposed to Prometheus in our certain microservices. We have one that's Cloud Native App Front End, HTTP request total, and then one Cloud Native Backend, HTTP request total. So if we go ahead and click this and we view the metric, we should see a value of 1 because we've actually done a curl on that, right? And if we go to backend, we should also see a corresponding call to the backend service, right? So now if we go into the Jaeger UI and we get a list of traces, we should see two services, front end and back end. And if we go ahead and click front end and say find traces, we actually have a full trace of our transaction through our application. So if we go ahead and click here, we can actually see the time that front end took, which encompasses the entire time, right? So it's front end, it was doing whatever work it was doing, which calls to back end. So this is the start of the back end call. And then you can see here that this is where we wrapped getgoogle.com. So we're just getting an HTTP GET on Google's homepage. And then once that completes the functionality for back end and then returns all the way up to front end. So this is a full trace through our microservice-based application. You can see that it took 384 milliseconds. And now if we go back and we do another curl of the same page, right? Our front end will get back the Google homepage again. Now if we go to Prometheus and we go to front end, what we should see is a value of 2, right? Because we've called this service twice, and we should also see that in the back end, which is perfect. Now if we go to the Jaeger UI, so we'll find something very, very interesting here, is if we go find traces, we see that we have the first trace, right, which we did about 2 minutes ago. And now we have our second trace, which is our second call to our application. Now we notice that the time it took to do this is significantly less than the time it took to do it the first time. And if we go down and we click, we can actually see that call to front end calls to back end, and that page now, the google.com, the HTML for it, was actually ended up being cached. And so there was no corresponding call to google.com. And so that's why there was a significant amount of time saved from making the second call. So this is very cool. And this just kind of like demonstrates how metrics are important. It's a very easy way to understand, like, calling into a service, seeing that increment get incremented, and then looking at the trace inside Jaeger and understanding what the behavior is of your service, of your microservices, and understand what's happening behind the scenes, the timing that it takes to do certain operations. Cool. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed the demo.